Hello, my name is Nicholas Morton and I'm going to be giving you a talk here about writing tips, some do's and don'ts. What are some good ways to write essays? What are some tricks of the trade and ways to do it really effectively? I want to start by thinking about what I consider to be the golden rule of history writing. And that golden rule is clarity. Your argument should always be clear. Your reader should never be in any doubt about what you're trying to say. As far as I'm concerned, I don't really mind if you write with the complexity of the cat is in the hat, provided your argument is clear. And this leads me on to very naturally to another point, which is don't try and be more complex in your writing style than you feel comfortable with. There's lots of essays I get where students have tried to use more complicated words, thinking that that will substantially improve their grade. Actually, that isn't the case. Often if you use words you're not comfortable with, your meaning comes across rather awkwardly. Sentences don't flow in quite the same way. It's a little bit more vague than you'd really like to see, and so actually it can negatively affect your grade. So try and write with as much clarity as you possibly can. Similar vein, when it comes to sentence structure, try and avoid writing in really long sentences. Again, this blurs the clarity of your writing. Sometimes when you write a sentence that's maybe 6 or 7 lines long, it's actually quite hard for your marker to really get a grip on what you're trying to say or to follow your argument all the way through those 6 or 7 lines. Typically, sentences should be fairly short, and again, this aids clarity, making clear statements one after the other and ultimately leading your reader through your argument. Okay, other tricks. Avoid writing in the first person. Remember that this is a formal piece of writing, so words like I, my, me, these kinds of things, or even worse, one, just don't write them. Just don't write your argument, I think this, one thinks this. That's not what we're looking for here. In a formal piece of writing, it should be much more impersonal, and you're still supposed to express your own view. Your argument should come across clearly, but you can write it in other ways, saying things like, the evidence discussed here shows that, or from the above it is clear that, or you can show that it's your view, your argument, without using those personal pronouns, using that kind of approach. Likewise, try and avoid informal language. This is a formal piece of writing, so slang, anything like that, again, try to avoid. And always explain yourself clearly. So imagine that, I don't know, you're sitting around with some friends and you want to explain a subject clearly. Let's say it's, I don't know, why a football match was played out the way it was, or why some other game was won or lost by a particular team. Imagine you're explaining it to them, and imagine they don't really understand the game that well. Walk your reader through your argument clearly, just as you would in a social situation, being sensitive to what they will know and what they don't know, probably erring on the side of caution with that. So explain yourself clearly. Think about what your audience can be expected to know. Another thing I come across occasionally is students who think that it's a good idea to put in quotes, perhaps from a pop song or from a movie. I think that there's a sort of view out there among some students this is quite a clever thing to do. And I have lost count of the number of essays or exams where students have told me that with great power comes great responsibility from Spider-Man. Again, just don't do it. Just don't. It doesn't work. It's not impressive. Stick to the academic line, stick to an academic approach, and keep your eyes focused on the evidence and the core debates that you're engaging with. A few other things that I find really helpful when improving my writing and trying to write clearly and trying to write so that my arguments flow from one point to another is when I write anything pretty much from a book to an article, I will often write first something that I call a concept draft. And a concept draft is, I should just put it another way. Let's imagine you're writing an essay in a conventional way. So you're writing, you've done 2 or 3 lines, and then there's a factor that you've forgotten, or there's a piece of evidence you just can't find, or there's a really great quote that you know you've read and it's in there somewhere, so you've gone looking for it and you can't find it. So you break what you're doing, you go rooting through your files, perhaps you have to nip off to the library and go and find it, and you do find it. And 15 minutes later, an hour later, whenever it may be, you sit down, you put in that bit of information, but you've lost the flow. you've lost the thread of what you were saying, and you try and restart it, but actually it no longer works in quite the same way. You get back into it, you write another 5 or 6 lines, and again, you come across another roadblock. You've got to go and research something else. You've got to go and find something else that you need to complete your essay. Now, writing your essay in that way, in some ways it's the most obvious thing to do, because as soon as you hit something that you don't know about, you go and find it out and you carry on writing. But ultimately, the written style can, I've often found in my experience, end up being a little bit clunky, in the sense that one passage reads well and then it sort of doesn't quite flow with the next one, which then reads well for a bit but then doesn't quite flow well with the next one. So I don't do that approach. Once I know what I want to say broadly, what I do is I will write larger chunks. If I come across a piece of evidence that I don't know about, or if I come across a factor that I can't quite remember, or a quote that I can't quite put my hand on, I don't stop writing. So I write, come across a roadblock, but I don't stop there. What I do is I put in an @ symbol, and I put a brief description of what it is that I'm missing. So @ symbol, input quote here from a given historian, and then I carry on writing. And so typically what I'll do is I'll write my entire essay in just a few sittings, but it will be full of these @ symbols, these gaps that I couldn't quite remember a piece of evidence about, or I wanted to go and check something. Now, the point of this is that I've written the whole thing, and stylistically it flows quite well, but neither have I forgotten those places where I need to go and do a bit of extra research. So I haven't been breaking my flow of consciousness, I haven't been breaking the flow of my words. I've written the whole thing, it does work stylistically, but all I have to do is do Control F, find all those @ symbols where I've got all those gaps in my essay, and then I can take a sort of shopping list to the library or to my notes or whatever it is, and then I can find out those bits of information I need without breaking my flow of consciousness. That's all I do. It's just a thought. You might find it useful. So I hope these notes have been helpful. Please look at my next talk on, well, we're looking at some other tips for success in essay writing. Thank you.